Have you ever seen your baby flail their arms out all of a sudden, and it's always because you're either placing them down to go to sleep, or they listen to a really loud sound, or you just turn on the lights. And here comes the Moro reflex. And that's actually very normal and very typical for a newborn baby. But what happens if it's not fully integrated, and how can we help your baby fully integrate that Moro reflex so these issues don't arise and they don't retain this reflex? In this video, I'll be talking about what is the Moro reflex, how does it look like, when it typically integrates, and what happens if it doesn't integrate, and what can you do about it with different types of activities to help integrate this particular Moro reflex. The Moro reflex is one of many primitive reflexes that a baby has. It's definitely an evolutionary response that kicks in when the baby feels like they're falling, or when the baby listens to a really loud sound, or if there's anything that's very startling, because this is truly a fight or flight response, which is also known as a protective response for a newborn baby. And this is not the only reflex that a baby has, but they have multiple other reflexes to be able to survive. And then eventually some of these reflexes end up integrating, meaning that they end up going away, and then they end up being replaced by actual voluntary movements rather than involuntary movements, which is what we see with the Moro reflex. Now, in this particular clip, as you can see with a particular doctor, that they're grabbing the baby and they're basically trying to not throw the baby down, but basically they're putting the baby down, and eventually their arms end up flailing out and they quickly end up recoiling them back in, and then they automatically end up crying. And again, this is more of a protective response that the baby does. So this is very typical, again, as I've mentioned, for the baby to do. Some babies have it a little stronger than others, and that is totally fine and understandable. As long as the baby has that Moro reflex, it's a good sign. Typically, the Moro reflex ends up integrating between 3 to 6 months of age. You typically end up noticing that the Moro reflex is integrated when the baby is not startling as often as they used to, especially when they were newborns. They end up sleeping a little bit more peacefully, and they have more of a smoother, controlled movements compared to how they had them before. This is typically a sign that the brain is maturing and higher level motor control is also developing. Now, if the Moro reflex is not integrated, this can lead all the way to adulthood. There's actual adults that do feel that they have that startle reflex. They still have more of that Moro reflex where their arms end up flailing. And some of these reflexes are also seen in kiddos who have developmental delays, or even kiddos that are usually seen as typical, but the families end up realizing and noticing that there are certain things that are not okay with their little ones. So for example, oversensitivity to sound, light, or touch, sleep issues or frequent night wakings, poor coordination, or delays in motor milestones. There's also emotional reactivity or poor self-regulation that comes with this unintegrated Moro reflex. And there's many other things that can happen as well with the unintegrated Moro reflex. And typically therapists that are trained in this particular integration of reflexes do end up working with older little ones and even adults to help integrate these reflexes to be able to calm down more of that nervous system. And overall, it does help the toddler or the child to be able to function a lot better throughout the day. So now, what do we do about it in this time frame that's very critical by 6 months of age? Now, these are different types of activities that you can start doing with babies that are pretty strong, that are very typical, that have obviously still have that Moro reflex. And I am going to demonstrate these different types of activities that you could start doing with your baby. Activity number 1 that you guys can already try and already do with your newborn baby. Obviously, you want to be gentle if your baby is newborn or 1 month old or 2 months old, because they don't have that full motor control or strength. But this does help. So basically starting with your baby on their back with your hands and going up and down as gentle as possible. And yes, they are going to flail their arms out. Yes, they are going to have more of that startle reflex, or I'm sorry, the Moro reflex. And again, the more we end up doing a little bit of gentle Moro reflex, the better, because they will start noticing that, okay, you know what? Nothing happened. This is totally fine. I'm going to start creating more neuronal connections that this is not something to be alarmed for. So again, we're also stimulating that vestibular system in the inner ear as well too, to help integrate that Moro reflex as well too. Activity number 2 is doing tummy time on a ball. Now, tummy time on the ball, I would highly recommend this when your baby has a good stable head and they're able to bring their arms underneath their chest and lift up their head. As you could tell with my daughter here, she was about 4 months old, 5 months old here. She did have a little bit more of a stable head control. So again, you can definitely put your baby on top of a therapy ball on their tummy, or you could also, now in this video, in this clip, you could also do the baby on their back on a therapy ball as well too. And you could start doing that by 3, 4, 5 months of age. Depends on how your baby reacts. If your baby truly doesn't like it, then obviously we might want to stop that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should stop it completely. Maybe you could try it next time. Maybe it was just an off day. Maybe they weren't feeling very well. Maybe they were teething. Maybe, there could be so many factors to it. So you could try again the next day. So definitely try that. Now, this particular type of activity is on a regular hammock swing or even with a blanket, and you could go ahead and do just regular like swinging back and forth with another person. You could definitely do that. You could do it by 4 or 5 months of age, as long as the baby feels very stable and very comfortable and happy. That's totally fine. You guys could definitely do that. So grabbing a blanket and then having somebody hold onto the other side and then just kind of swinging them back and forth. This definitely helps activate more of that vestibular system as well too. Lastly, when it comes to an activity, is placing their hands and their feet together and then just kind of letting them go. So that also will activate somewhat of that Moro reflex. And you can start doing that at 4 months, 3 months of age or so, depending on if your baby loves it or not. If your baby isn't like super stable or is really sensitive to it, then maybe you could just start doing the hands first and then just letting them go, or doing their feet, bringing them to their tummy and then letting go of their legs. And again, you could just start doing that between 3 to 4 months of age. Pro tip number 1, and I think this is just the main tip that I would really give families, is start decreasing swaddling as soon as you can. The sooner the better. Obviously, we don't want your baby to fully depend on swaddling to be able to regulate and go to sleep. There's no particular research study that says that there is difficulty with Moro reflex integration just because you swaddled your baby. If you could do it for 1 month, a month and a half, 2 months max, that would be amazing. That would be great. Why? Because we don't want to take our chances regardless. But if you're doing these type of activities with them already, you're giving them free movement throughout the day, especially tummy time, and you're also doing some skin to skin as well, even when you're doing some napping on your chest as well, when they're newborns, then I'm assuming it's going to be totally fine. It's going to be totally fine when it comes to Moro reflex integration. Now, if you're noticing and you're actually watching this video and you have an older kiddo that you feel that might have a Moro reflex that has not integrated, then you might want to find an occupational therapist or a physical therapist that does do reflex integration. There are some chiropractors out there that do it as well too, but there needs to be some specific training and experience by that particular person. So definitely investigate, because there are programs out there that do help older kiddos to integrate more of these reflexes. So other than that, I hope this video helps. It was very simple activities that you guys can start doing with your little one. So definitely play around with your baby, and hopefully these activities can help integrate more of that Moro reflex. Thank you so much. Subscribe and check the notification bell if you really like these videos. All right, I'm out. See you later. Bye-bye.